everyone, it's Lexi. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 underrated books. So this is the topic for Top 5 Wednesdays. So if you're interested about this Top 5 Wednesdays, I'll have the Goodreads account linked down below. And yeah, so if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie though, this like Jeffersonian from like Bowen's mug makes me feel like pretty smart, so yeah, I feel pretty special with this, so let's just go and get started. So my first book has to be The Bone Garden by Tess Gerritsen, and Tess Gerritsen happens to be one of my favorite authors of all time. She wrote the Rosaline Isles series, which has a new book coming out in August, which I'm really excited for. But basically, this book centers around a girl named Julia who moves into this house that was built in the mid-1800s in Boston, and she's doing yard work in her garden, and she ends up digging up this body, which ends up being discovered that it was probably buried there since the early 1800s. So she's really curious as to why there is a dead woman's body in her garden and like the story behind that. So she kind of digs into the past. So then there's also a dual storyline where it flashes back to the Boston into the 1800s, and it follows the story of a girl named Rose whose sister just died after childbirth, and she's left with her sister's daughter, and her paths kind of cross with this medical student. And during this time there's like these murders taking place that are really gruesome, and they are both kind of like, I guess, the suspects or behind it. Everyone thinks that it's them, so they kind of work together to figure out what these murders have to do, because they seem to be linked to people who were involved with Rose's niece's birth. So it was really interesting. I really liked it because it did have that historical element of how much like medicine has changed over like the past like almost 200 years. Which is interesting because Tess Gerritsen is a physician, so a lot of this terminology and all that is pretty accurate because I am in the medical field, so I know what she's talking about. So it's interesting to see, and I was like on the edge of my seat the whole time. It was really good. So if you like kind of historical mysteries, like will be right up your alley, and I think this book deserves more talk on book 2 because I feel if people gave it the chance, it would be perfect. Like a lot of people would love it. Next is also a book that I read a couple years ago, and it is Firefly Lane by Kristin Hannah. And I know Kristin Hannah has been getting a lot of talk here on BookTube because she wrote The Nightingale, which I read even before the hype because I really love Kristin Hannah. And basically this one follows the story of two girls who become friends in their early teens, and it follows them through 3 decades of their life and how like their relationships change and the dynamics change and all that, and just how I think a lot of women can relate to having that friend in your life and just how much it means to them like to have this. So I think this book can be read by a lot of different people, and just kind of the different dynamics of female friendships and how they change and like as we get older and all that, and like how much they mean to us. And yeah, I really like this book. I feel like a lot of people would enjoy it. It is pretty big, but it was really good. I cried my eyes out in it. So yeah, if you really liked The Nightingale and Kristin Hannah's writing style, you will definitely love The Firefly Lane, because in my opinion that's like the modern day Nightingale in like her writing world, I guess. Next is also another book that I've read a couple years ago, and it is The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult, and this is a kind of historical fiction novel as well that has a dual storyline. So it talks about this girl who in modern day who ends up crossing paths with a Nazi, and just like how he's seeking forgiveness and all this, and he's really old and he's like a well-known figure in this community, and she has a hard time like grasping all that because her grandmother was a survivor of Auschwitz. So it has like the storyline of this girl kind of meeting this very old man who's kind of seeking forgiveness from her grandmother. He wants kind of forgiveness, and it kind of goes back to the grandmother's story in Auschwitz, and just the way it's described at like the concentration camp. Like I can picture it in my mind. It was so good. I feel like this, like if you like The Nightingale, like if you like historical World War II fiction, like this is perfect. It does raise a good question on like, do people deserve forgiveness for things that they've done? Are you willing to forgive someone who's done all these bad things to you? So I think this would be just like a really good book, and I actually kind of want to reread it because it was so good. So this next one is also another historical fiction one. You can see the trend here, and it's Orphan Train by Christina Baker Kline, and it basically talks about how in the early 1900s orphans like who were in New York were sent out onto this train called the Orphan Train, and where they were given to people all throughout the US. And so basically this has a dual storyline as well as present day, where a girl who is adopted is kind of struggling with this, so she ends up working at this old lady's home who was part of Orphan Train, and it goes back and forth between the old lady's perspective and just how she changed from parent to parent, and how there wasn't much regulation in terms of adoption, and it didn't matter if the parents weren't treating the kids well and all this. And I thought this was really good. I think this book deserves more credit because it moved me so much. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting because it's a part of history that I wasn't really familiar about and I didn't really know much about. So I think this one will be really interesting if you want to learn more about what's not really talked about in, like, I guess, American history classes. So yeah. And lastly, I think this one had a lot of hype when it came out, like when the movie came out and all that, but I feel like a lot of it has died down. It's The Help, and I'm sure a lot of you know about this, but I feel like it's kind of died down, but I feel like what the book talks about is really relevant to today's society and how much has changed and how much hasn't. I think this is something that's really relevant, especially everything that's going on politically and just kind of within police community dynamics and all that. So I think it's really interesting. This is another book that I want to reread. But yeah, like I think this book, I think especially now with everything going on, it should be much more relevant with what we're talking about, because it does play a part with how these dynamics have changed, but in a sense they haven't, and like what we can reflect on and how we can move forward from this. So I think this is a good book that I think deserves definitely more to be talked about more now, especially everything going on. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.